Welcome to part 2 of the Google Earth webinar series. This webinar is going to go through the USB sticks that the P2D project provided to all project participants, and basically just how to load them into Google Earth, what they're showing you, and how you can use them to make decisions. So this project is funded by the partnership between the Australian Government's Reef Trust and the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, along with Farmacist. And it's focused on supporting you to gain a better understanding of your farm, to maximise efficiency and profitability through precision ag data layers such as EM mapping, satellite imagery, georeference source samples, and yield maps. Okay, so we've got Google Earth opened, and over here we've got our P2D USB that contains our precision ag files. So it's important to remember that precision ag is about building data layers to help us make informed decisions. So throughout the project, you would have received some EM mapping done on your farms, as well as some soil tests, and you would have also got nutrient plans that were completed. So these are the files that are on your USB that you can load into your Google Earth, and then that way you can always have them on hand to help you make decisions down the track. So there's a few different files here. So each paddock that was mapped has an individual file, and then we've also got a combined file, which is called a normalized file. So we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. We've also got our nutrient plan application 1, nutrient plan application 2, and our soil files. The first one that we're going to load is just the individual EM maps. So to load it, I'm just going to click on this and I'm going to drag it into my screen, and I'm just going to minimize this for now. So what you can see is that there is some different colors and some squiggly lines on the map. And over on the left-hand panel, we can expand this out and we can look at the layers that are present within. So the first thing to note is that when we're doing TSM mapping, we get 4 different layers that come through the maps. The first is the 0 to 500 layer. The next is 0 to 700. There's then 0 to 900 and also 0 to 1100. So that's in terms of depth. And it's very important to note that they are an average of the readings that are happening between the 0 to 500 or the 0 to 1100. So we can only be viewing one of these at a time. So you can change the view by clicking on the different layers to view the different maps. So if we select the 0 to 500 layer and we expand that out, what we can see is 5 different zones, or as many different zones as your Farmacist agronomist has exported. Could be 3, could be 7. And it basically shows you the different amount of hectares contained in each zone. So the readings, as you can see here, so the readings for this zone range from 48 to 53, zone 5 is 57 to 64. So the higher the readings, the more conductivity that's present within the soil. So if we look over in these areas here, the darker areas here, so these are higher readings and they're more likely to be a heavier soil type, so more likely to be clay over a sand. They're more likely to be potentially saline over non-saline, or potentially sodic over non-sodic. So those are the types of characteristics of a soil that encourage a higher conductivity reading, which are going to result in higher mapping numbers. The areas that are lighter have less conductivity, so they're more likely to be sandy, have a lower saline level, a lower acidicity level. Basically, they're conducting less. So we can select any one of the zones and then come down to this little button down here and click that, and we can adjust the opacity of that zone. So you can do that for each of the individual zones. So just by dragging that slider you can do that. Or if you click on the layer as a whole, so the TSM 500 or whichever one you've got selected, you can move the opacity and you can slide it across all the way. So what you can actually see on this map, which is quite cool, but if you look at the map that's there and you look at zone 5, so these heavier layers that are running through the paddock and over here, and then we slide the opacity tool back down, you can actually see the different effects that this is having on the cane within the paddock. So it's quite a handy little tool to do that. If we go back onto our USB now, so our next file for me is our next paddock. So once again, we've got all our zones that are present here. We've got our layers with all our zones. So once again, we can use the opacity tool to slide it in and slide it out. And we can see the different zones that are present throughout the paddock. I'm going to turn back on our first paddock as well. So when these blocks were mapped, they were both collected individually at separate times, as were most of the paddocks that were probably mapped on your farm. Different conditions of the paddock can influence the numbers of the maps. So for example, if this paddock had been collected after rainfall or collected after an irrigation event, the general numbers of this paddock could be higher than what this paddock was collected if this one was collected after quite a dry period. So what this means is that the two paddocks might not merge so well together. So the data might look a little bit funny from one paddock to the next paddock. So the process to overcome this is called normalizing. So basically it involves a little bit of maths, but it allows us to blend two different paddocks that were collected at two separate times together to ensure that you can view the data in the best way. So on your USB stick, there is a normalized version. So I'm going to drop that in now. Now you can see that this, it looks very messy. That's because the other data layers are still turned on. So I'm going to turn off the first block. I'm going to turn off the second block. And I'm left with the normalized view. So on the Farmacist farm, because it's quite small and we've only got 2 blocks, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. But it is important to remember that the normalized view can be really important to look at, just to make sure that the data is flowing between paddocks correctly. So there's different times that you would use the individualized paddocks versus the normalized. And it's really important that if you don't understand this, because it is quite a complex thing, just to go and speak to your Farmacist agronomist to help you understand it properly. If I was wanting to pick soil test locations or create a lime and gypsum prescription, I would be more inclined to use the individual map rather than the normalized map. That's just going to provide me some more finer detail within that paddock to allow me to get the target the zones that I'm looking to target for my soil testing. If I was looking to, if I wanted to view the farm as a whole, just to see where different zones flow within the soil, I would be more likely to be looking at the normalized view. Once again, it still has the different layers. So we've got the 500, 700, 900 and 1100, which we can select. So, 'cause, 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 ' When the Farmacist team has done the EM mapping, the next thing that we do is ground truthing. So that involves taking some soil tests, which we also have copies of on the USB. So under the soils layer, so we can drag that in, and all these little orange dots pop up, little orange markers. We can actually just click on these markers and it brings up all the lab results that were taken for that soil test. Some of the important things to look at, firstly, is ESP. So that is your reading of whether the soil is sodic or not. If the reading is over 6, then you may have some acidicity present. It's important to note that so this sample here was taken in a higher reading zone. It's more likely to have a higher ESP or a higher salt reading, which is your ECs, than samples that were taken over here in the lighter zones. 2 and the ECs are here. Because within this paddock, the acidicity was not high and the salinity was not high, it's unlikely to be the driving force behind the different zones within the paddock, and it could just be a change in the cation exchange capacity. This could be a higher clay area and therefore have a higher moisture holding capacity than these lighter areas over here. So once again, over on the left-hand panel, we can expand the soil out and then expand the samples out, and we just get a list of all the different soil samples that have been taken. So each year after you get your updated soil tests, when your paddocks are fallow, we can provide you with an updated soils layer that just makes sure that you've got all the latest results. If we zoom in over here, you can see that on this particular soil test, when I click on it, it brings up quite a number of soil samples all in the one location. That just means that there's been either multiple years, so depending how long you've been working with Farmacist, we might have some historic samples in there from the previous time that it was fallow, or there may also be some subsoil samples that, so 0 to 20 is topsoil, 20 to 40 or potentially even deeper, they'll be recorded in the same location. So if you click on them, you can then select which one you want to view. So just to organize these files so we don't get too confused, I am going to right click on temporary places and add a folder. I'm going to call this folder EM mapping and click OK. And I'm just going to drag these 3 files into the EM mapping folder. I'm also going to create a folder just called Farm Files. Which I'm just going to put the EM mapping in there and the soil in there. Okay, so that way we can turn on our farm files. All together. Okay, so if we go back to the P2D USB, the next thing that we've got to open is our nutrient plan for the year. So this is going to be a really handy one to open on the web and then be able to view on your phone. So we will go through that as well, but we'll just touch base on how to look at it on the desktop version first. The first thing I'm going to do though is just to turn off the EM mapping and turn off the soils layers, just so I've got a nice clear viewpoint to be able to view my nutrient plan. So to import it, click and drag and drop. And we've only got one paddock that we're fertilising at the moment, which is our plant block here. So we've got Everest S at 250 kilos per hectare. Now, it just depends how the maps have been exported. This one's got the label sitting on it, but it may also just be blank and you just need to click on it and it will show Everest S at 250 kilos per hectare. So this is application 1. So plant, my planting application. Going to also drop in application 2, which is my top dress application. So Growforce Fire 555 at 465 kilos per hectare. And once again, I can click on it and I will get the product name and the rate. Now, it's important to note that you can only view one application at a time. So we can turn off application 1 and view application 2, or just view application 1. But we can't have both of them turned on at the same time because you will still only see the bottom one. Once I've viewed all my files, I'm then going to go over to Farm Files on the left-hand panel and right-click, and I'm going to go Save Place As, Farm Files. Now this is going to make it easier to just bring it into the web version. So if we click on the internet and we go to the web version of Google Earth, we can then import a file. So if I expand that, that then brings in all the different maps that we've just made in Google Earth Pro. So the easiest way to open your nutrient plans onto the Google Earth app is if you email the nutrient files that are on your USB to an email address that you receive on your phone. So I've emailed both of those applications there. I'm going to click on the first one, and then I'm going to click on the bottom left-hand corner on the share button. From there, I'm then going to select the Google Earth app, and it's then going to load into the app automatically. If I then return back to Mail, and then go back to Nutrient Plan Application 2, I can do the same thing and share it into the Google Earth app. So it's important to manage your layers. So application 1 and application 2. So you can click the 3 little dots and then click hide on map, because you can only view one of them at a time. Once we've got our Google Earth file in our mail, we can click on it and then click the bottom share icon and then select Google Earth. Once we've done that, that's going to open up the soil maps and the soil tests into the Google Earth application. From there, we can click on the bottom little triangle, which is then going to turn our location on our application, on our phone that we're using in the application. So that little blue dot there represents the application, the location on farm. As you move throughout the farm, you can click on the blue dot and that will refresh your location as well. Sometimes it will track, sometimes you need to click on the blue dot to get it to actually refresh. Now this location is going to be accurate within about 3 meters. If you're in tall standing cane, the location will be less accurate because it relies on satellites to provide that accuracy. So once your location is loaded onto the map and you are traveling to where you want to go, if you zoom in nice and close, you'll see your blue dot is updating as you move across. And in this case, we're going to our low EC zone to look at where this soil test was taken. From there, you can pull up your results and visually see what they were when that soil test was taken. And then from there, you can then go over to a different zone, or you could mark a new location if you're going to take a soil test in a different spot. That will then transfer back onto the Google Earth Web app to view on the computer or to provide to your agronomist. Thanks for joining in the Google Earth webinar on how to use your Farmacist spatial files that were provided to you as part of the P2D project. We hope that you've gotten a lot out of these webinars and that you're able to use your data layers confidently over a range of different Google Earth applications.